big thank you to everyone again for coming back. This is the first of the Philly Freelance Tuesday sessions. Going to be calling them Freelance Focus sessions. I've been running every Tuesday since we've been in quarantine. We made it through the entire month of April. Go us. It is now May, and I'm excited to say that in addition to today's awesome guest, we have basically the entire month of May booked up already. So we're going to keep these going. The feedback has been great. And folks are excited to share with all of you. So you can always check out the phillyfreelance.com site. Now has a live update of what the upcoming events are and will be. Obviously, we're going to keep them RSVP based as long as we're doing them online. As Catherine is reminding me, as you're coming in, it would be awesome for you to introduce yourself in the chat, say who you are, where you're joining us from. If you are in Philadelphia, what neighborhood you're from. If you're not from Philadelphia, what city are you joining us from? It's really cool that we're getting folks tuning in from elsewhere. And also, what kind of business do you run? What kind of freelancer are you? What kind of service do you provide? So in all of these workshop series, these lunchtime series so far, the goal has been to pick a common challenge or a common problem that freelancers experience, regardless of what kind of freelancer you are, and try and teach you something new, a new skill, a new outlook, a new technique to get better at something related to that problem. And somewhat by intention and somewhat by serendipity, a lot of these have been building on each other. And so one of the themes across the last couple of conversations about reaching out to new customers and clients, and how do you reach people when people aren't necessarily buying or scared about spending money, what can you do? You've heard a lot of folks talk about finding ways to support your customers even if they're not buying. How do you reach out? How do you be proactive? How do you be helpful? How do you stay useful and relevant? And a bunch of folks, including myself, have said education is one of the best ways to do that. And so when I think about education, I think about today's guest, Janelle Allen. Janelle's a longtime friend of mine. We've known each other through the internets. I'll let Janelle give her own introduction, but when I think about people who really embody what education means, I think of Janelle, because at the heart of everything, it's about meeting people where they are and helping them. Instead of that sort of vague deliver value, it's, well, what do people actually need and how can you give it to them? And obviously, if you run a service business as a freelancer, one of the ways you do that is by doing it for them. But education is a thing that I think a lot of people would benefit from, and not a lot of people have exposure to doing it well, or imagine for themselves that they could never be a teacher. And I think Janelle is an incredible person to sort of break down those barriers and show you what is possible, how to get started. And that's what today's all about. So I'm going to hand things over to Janelle. Before I do, just one more time for the folks in the chat room, if you want to drop a quick hello in the chat room, introduce yourself, say who you are, where you're from, in Philadelphia, what neighborhood perhaps, or if you're tuning in from elsewhere, that's great too, and what kind of freelancer you are. But with that out of the way, Janelle, thank you for joining us today from sunny Chicago, Illinois. But you've spent some time in Philadelphia too, so you got Philly roots, right?
My mom's from Philly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say you can leave, but you can't take it out of your heart. So
You
you're
definitely cannot
you're
take Philly
you're
out of my
Philly,
mom.
you're Philly through and through. So that's why we got you here as well. So thank you for being
Yeah.
here.
Thanks for having me. Hey everyone. Let's see. We got a few people. So Mark, Ruth, Alicia, Chris, Victoria, Janet, Lisa, Alex. Hey. So like Alex said, my name is Janelle Allen, and Alex and I have known each other for a while. Actually, Alex, we've talked about this, I think, but I first met you when I was not doing anything online but around co-working. So it was kind of funny when we finally connected around entrepreneurship. So what I want to do today is, of course, talk about why education is the best marketing and how to get started and turn your service-based business, how to leverage online courses so that you can accomplish a few things. You know, you can have more time. A lot of service-based business owners want to scale back on the client work and be able to have something that's a little more scalable. So we'll talk about that. So I work best when I'm able to just have a laid back, interactive conversation. So please post your questions. I want to leave a lot of time for Q&A so that you really get something out of this. So I'm going to show a few slides to start off to give you some stats on online education, and then I'll pop out and we'll just talk as human beings. All right, let me share my screen. All right, let's open this up. Everyone seeing my screen? Okay, cool. So let's talk about education, especially in the context of being a service-based business owner. So this is some statistics and just some information that I shared at Q4 of last year, and it's really relevant to service-based business owners. But before we get into the stats, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Alex gave you, the high level, but by trade, I am an instructional designer, which most people don't know what that is. So I've kind of gotten the spiel down, but essentially an instructional designer is a fancy way of saying I study how adults learn and create online courses or just education experiences based on that theory to make sure that the outcomes are met. So I've been doing this work since 2000, I don't want to date myself, but 2009. So just a little over 10 years. I've worked with the CDC right out of my master's degree. I worked with the CDC creating e-learning, Starbucks, Potbelly Sandwich Works, and Pearson Education. So Pearson was actually my last job, real job as an instructional designer. And that was when I did a lot of work with academic institutions, so colleges and universities. And I left Pearson in 2012 and launched my own agency. So I was still working for education publishers, but doing it on my own terms. And that was when I first went all in as an entrepreneur. 2015, I lost a major client, and that gave me the opportunity to really take a step back and think about my business and who I was serving. And I made a big pivot and said, you know what, I don't want to work with these big multi-conglomerate corporations. I really want to work with entrepreneurs and small business owners. And so I launched Zen Courses in 2016 to pivot and serve people who I thought would get more of an impact, because I was getting a lot of questions from people who knew me online and wanted to create a course. So that's a little bit about me. Now, Zen Courses is now JanelleAllen.com, by the way. So if you look that up, you'll see that. So that's a little bit about myself. Let's talk about what's going on in online education and why it is a great time to be in online education. So a lot of people think that, the time has passed, I'm too late, to create an online course, and that's absolutely not true. So here are a few key statistics to give you some insight. So as of 2019, the global education market is expected to reach basically $133 billion by 2023, right? So there's a huge market. And while, yes, more and more people are creating online courses, what's also happening is the market is becoming more sophisticated and people are more accustomed to online courses. They're kind of normal now. It's not as shocking. When you first talked about courses in 2009, sometimes people would just look at you oddly. What do you mean you're teaching online? And now more and more people feel familiar with that, especially now, right? So we're in the midst of COVID and everyone is online. So it's especially relevant now. Okay, so, oops. The big takeaway here is education has changed. I am dating myself, but I don't know if anyone knows what this image is, but you used to have to go to the library if you wanted to learn something, and you'd have this, card catalog, and you'd be on computers looking things up, but you were centered in the library. And everyone knows now that that has changed. Now the odds are in our favor, right? So when you want to learn something, when people want to learn more about your topic, at this point, where do you go? You're going to go basically one of two places. The top two places that people go when they want to learn something, they're going to go to Google, and they're also going to go to YouTube. Those are the top two search engines. So there is a huge opportunity for you to show up when people are looking for something on your area of expertise. Looking at YouTube specifically, again, YouTube is the second most popular search engine out there. There are over 500 million views of learning related content on YouTube every single day. So this is huge if you are thinking about sharing. You know, right now marketing is a little bit sensitive, right? Everyone's trying to figure out, how do I market during a pandemic? However, it's never a bad idea to start sharing your expertise. And YouTube is a great way to do that. And there is already an audience there looking for insight on your topic. Another stat that I thought was kind of funny. So the top two videos on YouTube are education and animal videos, surprising. But education gets 4 times the amount of watches than those animal videos. So this just kind of drives home that people are really going to YouTube specifically to learn how to accomplish something, to learn a skill, to learn how to, write something or to shoot a video, whatever the case may be. So let's pop out and talk more about how online courses can help your service-based business grow. All right, so I'm gonna pop out of the slides and let's just chat at this point. A lot of service-based business owners come to me and they want to create an online course, but they're not sure where to start or even if it's a good idea. So let's talk about the latter first. As I said a little bit earlier, now is a great time. It's always a great time to create an online course. Now even more so because you have so many people who are looking to online education to learn something. So if you have a service-based business, this just makes sense for a few reasons. Number one, most service-based business owners, and I still do consulting, so I'm a service-based business owner just like you. You're going to have a finite amount of hours that you can do something, right? And so, especially if you have gotten your process down, you know exactly how you work with clients and you're able to document it and package it up, then your business is ripe for an online course. The main reason, most of my most successful clients packaged up their expertise and sold to people who weren't able to budget their services. In other words, you're going to have segments in your business. You're going to have people who frankly can afford to hire you, and you're going to have people who may not be able to budget your services. Have you ever thought about having an online course to reach that segment who may be working with you one-on-one isn't a right fit? And it's not always about money. Some people simply they have more of a DIY personality, so they want to learn from you in a different way. And that's why service-based businesses are perfect for online courses. I tell pretty much everyone, every time someone asks me about creating a course, I usually tell them to start with a service. So the advantage to starting with a service is, one, we've already talked about, you're going to have what I call a proven process that you can put into place. Also, if someone is paying you for a service, you've already validated that there's a need for that, right? So one of the big things that I teach new course creators is to, don't fall in love with your idea, build it, and then launch to crickets. Right? Do some research, some validation to see if people actually want a course on your topic. Well, if you're a service-based business owner and you have clients who are already paying you, you've already validated that there are people who want that information, that process, those results that you can deliver. So it really gives you a leg up in that regard. So hopefully this is making sense. I'm going to pause here and see if just check the comments. Okay. Yes, the card catalog. I love that photo. Market projection, C19. So Mark asked, what was the market projection for pre-COVID-19? That was 132 billion is what the market was projected to reach. All right, so I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing any questions. So the big question a lot of people have after is, does it make sense? Am I too late? You're not too late. So the best way to get started with an online course is, one, if you already have an audience, reach out to them. And I always like to start with surveying my audience and finding out what are they having challenges with, what would they like to learn. I don't typically ask around price point, but I do try to dig into their pain points and what results they want to achieve. Then from there, so if you don't have an audience, there's still some things you can do. Alex is an expert on this stuff, but you can research other people's audiences who are in your niche. You can also go wherever your audience might hang out. We talked about YouTube. YouTube comments are a great place to see what questions people are asking on your topic. You can find people who are putting out content on your topic and just look and see what are they talking about. Also, webinars, also a great place with some comments. Alex, help me out. Am I missing a few places? Facebook groups, LinkedIn, if your audience is there. So
Yeah.
that's
I was going to say, even on Twitter and things like that, look for the things that people are basically wherever it is that people in your profession are hanging out and having conversations. Look to who's starting the conversations, but then look a little bit further and see what are people responding to, reacting to, and things like that. It could be anywhere.
Yeah. And the key things that you want to look for are the problems people are talking about. So what are they saying I need help with? And I like to tell people, look for expensive problems, and what that means is something that's causing so much pain in their life that it's causing them a lot of time and or money, and they need a fix. You'll have smaller problems for, let me see if I can think of an example. I don't know. I've just painted during quarantine, I painted walls in my house. I was going to hire somebody, quarantine hit. I had all this extra time. It was no longer an expensive problem. I just did it myself, right? So it was something that I could have done myself all along. It's not that critical. But if you're talking about something that is really, especially if you're serving business owners, something that's really maybe making them lose money, taking up a lot of bandwidth, so on and so forth. You want to look for those. You also want to look for the solutions they've tried. So if they're saying, I've tried X, Y, and Z, that gives you some insight and you can go and check out what are those solutions. You also want to pay attention to the language that they're using. How are they talking about the problem? How are they talking about the solution? That makes it really easy for you to then take that language and implement it in your marketing so that you're using words that they're actually saying. So results, I don't know if I mentioned results, but the result that they want to achieve, the problem, language, and solutions that they've tried. So once you have a good sense of, okay, there is a market for my course idea, and you have the advantage because you have a service-based business, so you have a process in place, then what I usually advise my students to do is not to go into a cave and spend a year creating your course and then put it out and ask people to buy. Do two things. One, get people involved. So if you have an email list, if you have an audience, give them a heads up. You're creating something, kind of involve them, give them updates on what's going on so that they start to feel part of the process. If you don't have that, you can still get people involved by starting to put out content. You can put out YouTube videos where you're creating things and just, guiding people along the way and just getting kind of that community feel of what you're putting out there. And then create a pilot, right? Do a live workshop version, do a small, I think Amy Hoy calls it a tiny version or a tiny product of your course, something that you can launch or just get done in a weekend, get it out there, see what questions people have, and then iterate on that. Once you have, workshops are great and workshops are so fun because you can see all of the comments coming in, you can see what hits, where are some of the content gaps. Maybe you thought, okay, I'm going to teach these 4 topics, but then people come in and they're asking a lot of questions about that 5th topic that you didn't think was going to be important. And all of a sudden you realize it is. So I highly recommend doing a pilot version of your course. Just do a workshop and then build on that, take the feedback from your students, and then you can package it up into a self-paced course or a group program, whatever format that you want. So I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions. So I feel like I've been chatting quite a bit. Alex, anything come up for you?
I was going to ask a little bit about, you started touching on, before we go create a course, want to create smaller stuff. So I love your suggestion about creating, a workshop, for instance, where, there's a problem that you've heard multiple clients or client prospects ask, and you're like, well, the reason they're not buying is because they're maybe too small of a business to hire me for my services, but maybe if I get 3 or 4 or 5 of them on a Zoom call for an hour or two, I can teach them how to do it themselves and things like that. I think, I'm imagining some folks who've never taught something before. Is there even a step smaller than a workshop? Because I think your
Yeah.
point about a workshop is that you get that live feedback loop, which is really valuable to get. But if that's intimidating, what would be the even smaller,
Mhm.
simpler starting point before?
Yeah, that's really great. And there's 2 options. So the first option is I have a client right now who his first paid course was just an email course. So it's just text-based, delivered via email that he put out, and it sells. It's a small product. I think he sells it for $50. So that's one way that you could get started if your content lends itself towards text. Another thing that you could do is package up a few videos. So maybe if going live freaks you out, maybe you can just grab a webcam and record some videos and package it up as a video series and then sell it that way. So those are 2 smaller, if doing a live workshop is a little scary, those are 2 smaller steps that you can take.
Is it cool if I add one more?
Yeah.
So, one of the things I hear freelancers talk about a lot, and I've felt this pain myself many times, is when you get an email from a client, or worse, someone who will never be a client, but they have a question for you. Hey, I just a quick question. I just want to pick your brain, and your
Mhm.
heart sinks, and you're like, ugh, this person's never going to buy. Why am I giving away all this advice for free? I'm going to drop a link in the chat to an article that I wrote a while ago. I look at those emails and questions as opportunities to create education. So anytime where you would help somebody one on one, that feels like a waste of time because you're going to help that person and who knows if they ever come back, right? Sometimes it's nice to help people, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if you want to, you should. But the way I look at it is, if I can help that person in a way that helps multiple people, I now have the leverage. So
Mhm.
a lot of the articles that I'll write, blog posts or a video I'll record, or even some of the topics we've come up with for the Philly freelance community, have been questions that I've been asked multiple times, and then I'll write an answer to that person in email, which is so much easier than writing a blog post, by the way. Just respond to the email, and then you copy paste that email and you drop it in your Google Doc, and then you clean it up and you give it an intro and you give it a little bit of context and some formatting and some structure. Most of the most popular blog posts I've ever written, including the one that I just linked, started as a brain picking session that could have been a giant waste of my time, but instead I flipped it around and said, what can I teach this person? And would that be valuable to somebody else? Once you start looking at things that way, everything becomes an opportunity to teach,
Yeah.
and without all of the weight and gravity of creating a course, which I know personally how valuable that is, but I also know it can be very intimidating, and it's like writing a book feels like a very big commitment, whereas like writing an email is at the other end of the spectrum. Every single person in this room can write an email this afternoon, and I bet that email's 90% good enough to be a blog post by tomorrow.
That's a great segue. So I want to talk about that. But first, I want to say just by a Y for yes, if you have an email list, N for no, Y for yes, so that I can get a sense of where people are at. Because we're talking about things that, things that you can do over email. That's a great segue, Alex, because yes, teaching, it doesn't always have to be a course. Creating content, so using content marketing and just putting yourself out and being of service to people through blog posts, through I have a podcast, through any type of content that you can put out there, you know, one-off YouTube videos, is a great way to get started and build some authority in your space. And Alex is absolutely right. So the first thing that I did when I started an email list, and everyone should start their email list. The first thing that I did was I had a welcome email where I asked people to share their top 3 challenges with me. Or I think the first one was just one. You can even just say, what's your biggest challenge? That email, I still have a folder to this day with tons and tons of responses from people. And it gave me my first content ideas. Because when you're starting out, if you don't have a blog right now, or if you're thinking of launching any type of content channel, right? The biggest challenge is, well, what do I talk about? Where do I start? And the best thing you can do is to let people tell you what they need. Yeah, someone, Alex is saying, ask me, anything's are awesome for that. Also, to Alex's point, you're going to get questions. So it's so funny you said that, because I have a question in my inbox right now from someone who periodically sends me questions and, you know, always talks about working together, but just keeps sending me questions for free advice, right? So the inclination is to get really irritated, but then you turn it around and you say, okay, this is a question. And actually, Alex, I said to myself, I'm going to do a video, I'm going to post it on YouTube. And that will be a piece of content. And that's, if you don't have an audience yet, that is one way you can start putting out content that's going to be valuable. Because if one person is asking you that question, guaranteed there's at least 2 more people out there who have that same question. So that is a tiny way that you can get started. If it's not about creating a course, but just get started teaching, is by responding to questions that come up. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, I have to say this, if you're sitting there thinking, well, that's great if you have an email list, but I don't. Think about your clients. Your clients ask you questions all the time. Clients ask the same questions all the time. So start thinking about what are the things that repeatedly come up with my clients, and let me go ahead and create some content around this. It doesn't have to be a course. It can just be a piece of content that you put out. You can put it out however works for you. You know, if you're great at writing, you can do a blog post. If you prefer video, you can do a YouTube video, but just get it out there to the public. Same thing goes if you do want to create a course. What's that repeatable process that all of your clients ask about, find insanely valuable? All right, I think a couple of questions came in. So Barbara says, have you used LinkedIn to post content and attract followers if you're just starting out? You know, Barbara, that's a great question. So I've been hearing a lot of people talk about how LinkedIn does really well for getting clients and getting traction with content. I have not done a ton with it. There's a woman by the name of Carrie Twigg who, follow her because she specializes in LinkedIn marketing. I don't have her Twitter or any of her information, but just Google Carrie Twigg. And she is going to give you all of the content that you could ever want on LinkedIn marketing. Great question. But yeah, LinkedIn is a good place to be, especially if you serve business owners. Alex says, I've seen a lot of engagement on Reddit, especially from younger designers. Okay, so Alex is, yeah, Reddit. I don't have a ton of, I go to Reddit to source information. Alex, have you done a lot with Reddit?
Reddit is funny because Reddit is not, it's like LinkedIn. Reddit is not one place. It's lots of sub communities. So
Yeah.
every sub community is different, has a different culture. Some of the more technical ones are really aggressively anti self promotion, and what they designate self promotion is sometimes a little too heavy handed, in my opinion. But I think it's a great place for finding people who are actively looking for help and just participating in the comments and becoming sort of a known member. If you think of every subreddit as its own little micro community, and by showing up and earning trust by being helpful, goes a really long way. There's what I would say with Reddit in particular, though, is posting your own stuff is what a lot of people jump to. Is like, I have a new YouTube video, so I'm going to post it to Reddit, and those results are very variable. But being active in the comments is extremely fruitful across lots of different parts of Reddit.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that goes across the board. That's something Alex and I have talked about. So the objective, and I'm going to come back and talk about email lists. Thank you to everyone who shared where you're at with that. The objective is not to pitch. It is to deliver value. And the title of the presentation slides I showed was "Education is the Best Marketing." It truly is. So for everyone right now who's trying to figure out, well, how do I market during this time? The way that you market is, one, by being human. We're all dealing with a bunch more than we were, in, when did this start? January, December, whenever. But also you deliver value. So really honing in on what are the pain points people have, what are the questions people have, and delivering value through content. And you can definitely do that now, just like you could do it before, but it's super valuable now because you can start to build your audience, right? You can start to build some authority. You can start to make people feel like you understand where they're coming from and you've helped them with something. And that ultimately is going to build a relationship, which is where you then, when it's time to lead them and say, hey, I have this offer, you're just building off of the relationship that you've already started months ago.
Janelle,
So
that's a really good question from right before you
yeah.
asked about newsletters, about organizing material to be digestible. It's from Lisa. It says, any tips for organizing content to be digestible for students, business owners, or leaders? Design and layout of the content,
Mm.
particularly technical content, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a big question, Lisa. And Alex, I would love to get your insight, but here's what I have learned especially for writing online. If we're talking about articles and the layout of posts, is to break them up. And when I say break it up, I mean, usually when we write elsewhere, we're going to have longer paragraphs of content. And what you really want to do is to break it up, to have steps, make sure any types of steps you have are bulleted or numbered. Make sure you're using headings, and just try to break it up so that it is scannable. So when we're reading online, we're all scanning. We all do it. We can kind of do it without even thinking about it at this point. So that's one of the best things that I learned, because it allows the reader it motivates them to keep reading. When we look at a big wall of text, our eyes start to glaze over and we just kind of want to take a step back. So from that standpoint, if we're talking about articles, those are some tips I would say. If you're talking about creating a course or any type of content that you're teaching, from an instructional design standpoint, you want to do what we call chunking, which is, starting with the goal in mind, and then really looking at, okay, how can I break this up? What are the components? So if I have, a module, what does that module break down into? What are the specific lessons that get me to that module outcome? And breaking it up so that you have those small digestible pieces. But that's a big question, Lisa. I could probably talk about that for an entire entire segment, but hopefully that gives you a little bit. Anything you want to add, Alex?
Agree completely about adding structure. The way I think about it is, if I were to skim the entire post for headlines, do the headlines tell roughly the same story of the content, right? So if I'm busy, and you have to presume your reader is, can they get an idea of where this article is going to take them by reading through it? And there's nothing wrong with long articles, by the way. Many of the things that I write are thousands of words long, and that might go against a lot of common wisdom about, economy of words and attention and things like that. Long is okay so long as the right words, right? And so the
Mm-hmm.
key, I think, is, in addition to that structure, is front loading the problem. Talking about what problem you're going to help them solve in this article, in the the very title, the subject, whatever the structure is, subject to the email, title of the post, and then the first couple of paragraphs. It's very easy to write what Amy and I often call as intro wank. It's the stuff that you have to write in order to get to what you really want to say. It's okay to write that. Everybody does. I do. Janelle does. We all do it. Write it and then edit it out. So when you're done writing your post, read the first couple of paragraphs and say, where do I actually get to the point? And then remove the rest of it from before that. So the sooner somebody can get to how this article is going to help them, once they believe, oh, you really understand the problem that I have, now you have their attention. And so long as you have those headlines that are going to keep them going, they're going to keep reading as long as they need to in order to continue getting the solution to the problem that you help them identify that they have.
Yeah, those are great points. And I just want to say that this comes with practice.
Oh yeah.
Put out it doesn't have to be perfect. Put out an imperfect article that, is just doing everything that Alex and I are saying, just doing the complete opposite. But do it. Just get started, like momentum, right? It's okay. You're supposed to go back and look at your old work and just be like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. I do it, but everything that Alex said about, the introductory, what I like to do is when I write, I just start writing. There's a great app called Ulysses. I love it for writing because it just is a clear screen and there's no distractions and it's just so easy. And I just start writing and then I go back and I clear things out and I get rid of that intro wank, as Alex and Amy call it. But I always try to ask myself, what is the goal of this piece of content? What is it that the end user, viewer, reader, whatever, wants to achieve or should be able to do? It's just me being an instructional designer. Everything's goal oriented. So that's one tip I would say. What is the goal of this? And that helps me to make sure I stay on track. I give myself maybe a few bullets and then I just start writing. All right, I want to get to a couple more. We've got a couple more questions. It looks like Sherry asked, how much time on average should we be spending on researching and creating content each week or month? That's a great question. I mean, it really, it really depends on, I think that it really depends on your situation, Sherry. Ultimately, gosh, Victoria's on here. My assistant is on here and she probably has some ideas. For, for me, I just have, what I do is, because I'm not really good about setting aside time. Some people are. So if you can give yourself, just start with an hour. What I have begun to do, and this is a tip that worked really well for me, it changed a lot of things for me, is I have what I call Marketing Mondays. And so I do set aside an hour the first thing Monday, more if I have it, but at least an hour to go through and kind of look at anything I've put into a repository for content. So I will go through, if I want to ask people to be on my podcast, I'll send out those emails. I have a template, so try to templatize any outreach. And so I specifically have a day. That works better for me than saying I need to do this 2 hours each week. It works really great for me to just chunk my calendar and say, this is the day that I do marketing stuff, content stuff. So Sherry, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
if I can riff on that a little bit for you, Janelle, I think there was a little subtle tip inside your tip, which is deciding what you're going to work on before you sit down to work on it. I think that is especially helpful when it is something you don't already have a habit around. So having a separate session where you say, I'm on Tuesday, I'm going to spend 30 minutes from 2 to 2:30 on the new designer subreddit answering questions. The more specific about what you're going to do and when you're going to do it before you do it, the easier it is versus sitting down at 2 p.m. on Tuesday and saying, I'm going to do some marketing now. Mm-hmm. Well, now you've got two problems. You have to figure out what marketing to do and then actually do it. So making those decisions. The other thing in terms of anytime somebody asks the how much time question, my answer for that is that consistency is more important than amount. So I think it's better to set a goal of something you can actually stick to with a regular schedule, even if it's less. versus, you know, dedicate if dedicating an entire day to it means you're going to miss it every third time, that's not good
Hmm.
enough. But doing it so you can hit the same mark consistently every week, and then as you get better at it, because like Janelle said, everything gets better with practice. Each time you get faster, which means you can do more of it, or the results are better. Then you can say, all right, well, it's not as exhausting either, so I can expand from 30 minutes to an hour or whatever it is. But so I'd say set yourself up for a win instead of the equivalent of when we say, oh, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do a full circuit, and when in reality you should be putting out your gym shoes
Yeah.
as the first
Yeah.
step.
Yeah, that's, that's definitely consistency is key. So whatever, exactly what Alex said, whatever you can commit to and show up for your people doing that regularly, definitely do that. The other thing about structure, I am notoriously bad with structure. I don't like rules. I don't like anything that tells me what to do. I'm
So
like,
Janelle and I are
no.
friends.
So, and yet, so, Victoria, my assistant, she's on here. She's probably going to laugh, but I've always been like, I'm not having an editorial calendar. I know exactly what I'm going to write. I'll figure it out as I go. But having the structure, the busier you get, structure it just makes your life easier. So now what we've created is we've said, okay, here are the themes that we're going to focus on for each month. And then we figure out, okay, this is the big theme. And then how do we break that into different weeks? And that makes it easier. Like this morning, I recorded a podcast episode and I knew exactly what I needed to talk about. So it makes everything easier. So if you're like me and you're hard-headed and you don't take rules or direction very well, trust me when I say it makes your life easier to kind of add some structure for how you're putting content out there. All right, we've got some questions. Alex's question. Yeah, Mark, you're right. It was just March 12th. That's actually the day that I started staying home, was March 12th. So, all right, Alex says, when you create content for people who don't have the subject for your main services, are you offering the same content just in a different form? I've been toying with the idea of, yeah. So the second part, I think I understand where you're coming from, Alex. The second part, it says you're toying with the idea of creating content for beginners, which don't have the budget that you would normally, who would normally buy your services. This is something that I know very well. It's, in my audience, I have segments, I do have beginners, and you can create content for beginners. What I would say, so what I learned the hard way when I started out, I was creating a lot of beginner content. I was putting a lot of energy into that. And ultimately, I found out that they weren't willing to spend money. So what I would say is target your content to people who have the money to pay you. If you're thinking about creating courses, if you're, whatever it is, if you're thinking about creating products, if you want to get people to hire you for your services, just do your due diligence and find out, this is where that research that we talked about before, if they've talked about solutions that they bought, then okay, these are people who would spend money, and then focus your energy there. I would be wary, and only because I did it, of spending hours and hours creating content for people who are really just looking for free information, because you're just going to cycle out. You're going to burn out. So you can have some of that content. It's very good for search. A lot of people are searching for that, but really focus in on, for me, I had to focus in on my growth segment who were willing to spend money to get to the next phase, get to that result. So hopefully that answers your question. Let me know if I missed anything. Let's see, any other questions here? Okay, Adriano says, how do you introduce new goals that your audience didn't want to achieve in the beginning, or new things they didn't know could be helpful to learn, perfect, or do? Yeah, so the Trojan horse, right? So, yes, you kind of have to figure out what it is that they want to talk about, and then how you can guide in that thing that they need, right? You always want to market to what people want. a lot of times we make the mistake of trying to market to what people need. And, you know, I just said, I'm really resistant to people telling me what I need to do, right? So we all are, right? Nobody likes that. So focus on the wants, and then you can bring in the needs. The best way, in my opinion, to do it is to really showcase the results and the value and the benefits. And then people they perk up a little bit, right? It's like, huh. So just to give you an example, for me, even though like when I started, I did a lot of content on instructional design, and people really wanted to hear about that. What they didn't want to talk about, and I'm talking about the beginners, what they didn't want to talk about was marketing. They were very resistant, you know, just had a lot of challenges and limiting beliefs around marketing. But what I started to do is to, you know, sneak that in different ways and talk about marketing and show them what was possible. And then it started to open up some conversation. So you definitely want to sneak it in with that Trojan horse. All right, Alex looks like shared a doc. Did I miss any other questions before we move on?
One more from Marta.
How much money should you be spending on your marketing? You know, I would say this really comes down to budget. But it also is, you could get started. Just really depends on, do you want fast results or do you want that longer, more impactful method? So I know people who use ads and spend a lot of money on ads. And I know people who focus on organic marketing where they don't spend a lot of money, but they spend a lot of time. So really deciding what your goals are, which works best for you. When it comes to, for me, I've predominantly done a lot of content marketing. And so I'm not spending a ton of money on ads. So that could work really well. And if you do that, then you will need an email service provider. So, you know, if you're going to launch your email list, what I like to tell people is to find what I call a broadcast channel. So it's going to be a channel where people go to look for content. So it could be YouTube, could be, you know, having your podcast on iTunes. And for that, you just need to spend money on the equipment that it's going to take for you to get set up. A podcast is a lot less expensive to get started with than video. But even with video, like right now, I'm just using a webcam and my microphone that I also use for podcasting. So those would be some hard expenses for having your broadcast channel. We talked about your email service provider. You could get started just with that. And then if you want to add other things onto that, if you want to do things like, you know, buying ads, then that's an additional expense. And it's just knowing what your budget is for that. All right. Yep. Convertkit does have a free plan. So speaking of email, I want to go back to everyone who shared where they're at. There's a few of you who have an email list, and then there's a few people who aren't set up yet. So if you haven't started your email list yet, it's not too late. I encourage you to definitely check it out. Like Alex said, Convertkit has a free plan, and I think they just changed it to where, what is it? You get
It's like it's significant. It's like 500 free subscribers, which is enough for us to get, you know, get all your past clients and do some initial, you know, blog posts that lead to subscribers. The other thing I really like about ConvertKit is they give you the code to put the little sign up box on your blog posts, your articles, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's really easy. They look nice and you don't need any extra formatting. You can even do standalone landing pages without even having your own server or your own site. So yeah, they're very focused on helping creative people like us. And so for while the pandemic is happening, they basically bumped up their free plan to be pretty powerful.
Yeah. Convertkit is great. A lot of my clients use Convertkit. So definitely, if you haven't started your email list yet, or even if you have and you're thinking about it, Convertkit is great. I also know a lot of people who use ActiveCampaign. The reason why, I just want to wrap with this, the reason why you want to have an email list is, one, it's going to allow you to control your marketing and basically your platform for putting your products out there. But I like to think of email in a different way. I think for me, email is the channel that converts the highest. You know, I've done research on email versus social media. Email knocks it out of the water, right? So email converts really well, but it also allows you to build a relationship with your audience in a more intimate, personal way. So most of my customers come from email, or it's kind of the same actually. So they might find my podcast, get on my list, but ultimately they're coming through email. And so having a list is going to allow you to nurture that relationship. It's going to allow you to have a list. So instead of you going out on social platforms trying to convince people to come to you, you can market to people who are already engaged with you. And they're going to be more likely to want to connect with you and find out what your offers are by someone opting in for your list, especially if they stay on your list. Sometimes people opt in and then they get what they want and they're gone. But for those who stay on your list and engage with you, they're telling you they want to learn from you. So it makes sense to market to those people first. They're going to convert at a higher rate than you trying to find people on Instagram or Facebook or, you know, Twitter, LinkedIn, where conversion rates, and just to give you an idea, social media typically converts less than 1%. Sometimes if you're a real master at it, you can get it higher, but email can convert anywhere. I mean, from, I've seen on the low end, 3%, a high end, we're talking 10 to 20%, depending upon how good you are with email. The only channel that converts higher that I know of is webinars. So hopefully that gives you some idea of the power of email. You show up in people's inboxes, you can connect with them on a human level, and it's just a great marketing channel. All right. Any last questions? Marta says that checks out. Yeah. Well, I hope this has been helpful. I think we're coming up on time, but you know, if there's any other questions, I just really want to encourage everyone to start teaching, you know, just putting out some articles or some videos or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a course right now. And then paying attention to what questions continue to come up. And then later on, you can start packaging that into a course if you like. So thank you. I'm glad everyone has notes. Oh, we got one more question. Marta says, are there things you can do to increase email open rates? Yes, there are things that you can do. You kind of have to get a sense of what content your audience wants. That's the first big thing that a lot of people don't talk about. Sending emails that are really relevant to your audience and the problems they're trying to solve is going to help your email open rates get higher. But also, one thing that you can do if your open rates have recently taken a dive, see if you need to prune your list. So you might have some old subscribers who are on your list but not really opening things. What I like to do is to send them an email and say, hey, I noticed you haven't opened anything in a while. You don't need to take any action on your part, but I just want to make sure I'm sending emails that are really valuable. So click here if you want to stay on the list. Otherwise, you'll be removed. There's nothing you need to do on your part. And that is something you can do that will give you that boost, because you'll get rid of people who are just kind of disengaged.
Great.
Cool.
Big thank you, Janelle. I want to bring a little tradition we've been working on over at Indie Hall. The silent Zoom applause is just, it's spirit fingers. So give Janelle a round of applause fingers for me. It's fun. I like it. Makes me happy. This is great, Janelle. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for coming and asking great questions. Follow-up session on how to build and use an email list. That's a great request, Mark. I've got a bunch of people we can tap for that. Really, really good. As always, we're going to be back here next Tuesday. Catherine, who's not dead next Tuesday? I can't remember.
Or yeah, we're losing track. It's with Jonathan Stark, and it's about repositioning yourself.
That's right. So yeah, I think hopefully seeing how a lot of these flow together. Jonathan, I think, is a great person to look to in terms of implementing a lot of the things that Janelle talked about. In fact, that's one last tip I'll offer is, like, look to people like Janelle and honestly anyone that's been in any of these series. Watch how they do this. Look at their websites. Sign up for their email list. See what they do and say, oh, I could do a version of that. I mean, a lot of the stuff you can learn by watching the best and borrowing, emulating, writing them an email and say, hey, does this actually work? And a lot of times, if you ask a question like that, you'll get a really good answer. Jonathan has done a lot of really interesting work in what he'll describe as sort of the three-circle Venn diagram of pricing, marketing. So what Janelle talked about is like how do you build trust through education? How do you price yourself effectively? And then the third piece, which is positioning. How do you communicate what you do and for whom you do it? So I think Jonathan's piece will fit really nicely into a lot of the stuff that Janelle was talking about this week. That's next week at same time, same bat time, same bat channel, right here on Zoom. And RSVPs are over at phillyfreelance.com. If you folks can check you out, JanelleAllen.com. Where else can people keep up with you, Janelle?
Yeah, JanelleAllen.com is the website. You can find the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's called Level Up Your Course. And then I've just recently launched a YouTube channel. I'm still learning, so be gentle. But on social media and on YouTube, I'm at by Janelle Allen, except for Twitter, which is just Janelle Allen.
Awesome. Yes, I can personally endorse Janelle's podcast as one of my favorites, and that's not just because I've been on it twice. It's really Janelle's an incredible interviewer and has really interesting, smart guests on. So if you're into this kind of thing, or you want to get more into this kind of thing, her podcast, Level Up Your Course, is just a great look at the sort of the educational side of and sort of I think the thoughtful, intentional side of marketing and online business is good stuff. All right, we'll let everybody get back to your Tuesday. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
Have an awesome rest of your week. I'll see you on the Philly Freelance email list. Cheers, everybody.